Welcome to another episode of Fabricate. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to work with EVA foam, mostly cutting and molding, and maybe a few other tips and tricks. I made another video a while back where I showed you how to make this bracer, and in that video I talk about most of these techniques used, but I just wanted to make a video where that was the sole purpose of it and you didn't have to, watch this whole thing just to see that. So first off, if you're not familiar with EVA foam, this is EVA foam. You might know it better as flooring. It's pretty much used in gyms and workshops and that kind of stuff for flooring, but it's actually a very dense and sturdy foam that is easily cut and shaped and molded and stuff. So a lot of cosplayers use this to make armor, anything that needs to be firm, not out of cloth. They also use what is called Worbla, which covers it, but we're not going to really talk about that in this episode. It's all about EVA foam. You can buy EVA foam in packs of 4, 6, probably more. This was a 6-pack that I got for $20. I found it at Ross. I was also told that they sell these at Walmart in 6-packs for about $20 as well. So this is a piece of EVA foam. As you can see on this side, it's pretty smooth. On the other side, it is usually textured. Sometimes it has this texture. Some of them have a texture like this, the galvanized metal texture. But this is usually the side that is going to be on the inside of your armor or whatever you're making, unless you need this texture for something. Sometimes it can come in useful. Mostly, this is going to be your outside. For this episode, I'm going to use a piece of scrap EVA foam so that I don't, waste any of my good stuff. It's always a good idea to keep a box of all of your scraps for EVA foam because you can find uses for them all the time. When you're working with EVA foam, you need a good cutting utensil such as this. It is an X-Acto knife. It has a thick plastic handle, so it's easier to hold. You could also use razor blades like this one that extend out and everything. Just make sure that you change your blades pretty often. And then another very important tool is a heat gun. You can also use blow dryers, but these are more efficient. And then of course, sandpaper is always useful. Scissors can come in handy as well, but they're not the best tool to use for cutting EVA foam. They actually get pretty nice cuts, but it's not as precise as using a razor blade or X-Acto knife. We have our piece of EVA foam here. I'm going to show you guys this little tiny piece here, the cuts. If you use scissors, you can actually make really nice straight line cuts. Scissor cuts come out pretty clean. However, when you start making multiple cuts with scissors on a long piece or something like that, it a lot of times can start to make it look pretty rough. And it's not as easy to detail with these scissors as it is with an X-Acto knife. If you're using some kind of X-Acto knife, make sure that you put a lot of pressure and you make nice straight cuts that are solid cuts and you're really putting a lot of pressure and going all the way through. If your blade isn't sharp enough, you're going to get more cuts that look like this. They're kind of messy, not the best looking cuts. So you want to make sure that you use a sharp blade. Apply a good amount of pressure and make sure you're moving pretty quickly and be sure of your cuts and you're going to get a lot smoother cuts. Another thing that I was told by other cosplayers to do is heat up the EVA foam with a heat gun before cutting it, which personally I haven't found that it really makes any difference. However, you can heat up your blade before cutting and it does make it a lot smoother. Now, as you can see, that actually made a really smooth, nice cut. It's probably the best way to make cuts on EVA foam. However, it is tedious heating up the blade every single time. You can get hot blades that are made to heat themselves up, and I'm sure that that cuts really well. I've never done it before. But as you should be with blades and with heat, be very careful because you're going to burn yourself. I've burned myself already today. It's kind of part of, a rite of passage when working on cosplay. Those are some good ways to cut EVA foam. If you do end up having some pretty rough edges, EVA foam can be sanded down, so you can always sand that off it ends up roughing up your edges a little bit, but it looks better than having these little pieces hanging off of it everywhere. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video besides cutting EVA foam is shaping it. I'm going to cut a piece off with my scissors just so that you guys can see. And let me just show you that cut. That was a scissors cut right there, and as you can see, when you start to make more cutting motions, it really just makes it look really rough on the edges. So in order to shape EVA foam, say you want to make it, you know, rounded like this, what you're going to do is you're going to heat it up and then hold it in the shape that you want to keep it in until it cools down a little bit. I would always suggest to heat up the opposite side of the EVA foam, just because when you heat up EVA foam it kind of messes with the texture a little bit because it burns it a little bit, and if you heat it up too much it can burn it a lot. So use the back side, the side that you're not going to be seeing in your class play. So once you've got the piece pretty warm, you're going to want to shape it into the shape that you want. Make sure you overcompensate. If you want it to be this shape, you're going to want to squeeze it as tight as you can to make sure that it stays that shape. Another thing is, if you don't want it to be, you know, this oval shape, you can kind of round it off by squeezing it a little bit, and that will help with the shape. Hold that for maybe about 30 seconds or so. It shouldn't take too long for it to start cooling down. So once it's cooled down some, you can let go, and as you'll see, it stays in that shape. It'll actually, as it cools down a little bit more, probably open up further, but what you can do is take the heat gun, hit it again with some heat, and then reform it. As you're heating it up again, it's going to flatten out, but then when you reform it and hold it in the shape that you want it to, it'll actually stay even more in that shape rather than, you know, let itself out some. That's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Painting EVA foam is fairly simple. You need to put a few coats of clear coat or Mod Podge on the EVA foam before painting it, because EVA foam sucks up paint very, very well, and you don't want it to do that because it makes the colors less vibrant. So Mod Podge, clear coat, and then paint it with your paint color, spray paint or acrylics, whatever you want to use. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was educational and helpful to you guys on how to work with EVA foam. Catch you next time.